Thank you, Catherine. My presentation is going to seem a lot like that time-lapse video because I've got 68 years to compress into 10 minutes. So it'll be an interesting little path we'll go through. Before I get started, one of the things I really want to do is I want to thank the museum for making the effort to highlight innovation in Kansas City. It's one of the things we don't talk about much. You're seeing a very small slice of what happens in this city today. And to focus on it and point it out, and actually all four of the organizations they're speaking are interconnected in one way or another, which is really a fascinating thing to see. We weren't brought in for those reasons, but we're interconnected through whether it's technology or collaboration or whatever it might be. So thank you, Catherine, and the museum for pointing this out. I want to take just a minute and talk a little bit about MRIGlobal and sort of our history, where we came from. How many people without black T-shirts that say MRIGlobal on them know about what we do at our organization? Okay, so just a few. That's good. That gives me a reason to be up here. Our founding in itself was really an innovation. It was right after World War II in 1944 that we were founded. You had names like J.C. Nichols and Arthur Magg and Spencer and Patterson. They were the civic leaders of Kansas City that said, you know, we've got to keep this economy going. We've built a lot of research capability in Kansas City as a result of the war. What do we do with all of it? And they said, let's start a not-for-profit research institution, which was Midwest Research Institute. Last year we renamed it to MRIGlobal because we're all over the world now. But really in itself it was about innovation. And you see a whole history of capabilities. We actually, it was mentioned, Catherine sort of mentioned it, if you look down the south side of the building here, essentially the front of Nelson-Atkins Museum, and go down the sloping hill there by the shuttlecocks, that's us that's right across the street there, so that you have some feel for where we are. But these folks decided we're going to use science and technology to have innovation to solve problems in the real world. That was sort of the focus, and again, that in itself was very innovative on a national scale. So my goal today is to give you a whirlwind series of just a few examples, tease you to go out into the lobby here and learn more about what we do, and then outside we've got all kinds of hands-on things that you can get involved in, just like my collaborators at the podium here. Okay, so first is energy. Catherine mentioned that. So we run the National Renewable Energy Lab in Golden, Colorado, have done that since its inception in 1977. We actually tried to put it in Missouri or Kansas, but we couldn't get them to donate the land to us, and Colorado would, so that's why it's in Colorado. It is the foremost national laboratory in the country and really the world focused on renewable energy and energy efficiency. And one of the big areas we work on is wind. So when you drive by that big wind farm, when you're going out the rather boring drive out west toward Colorado on I-70 and you go by that huge wind farm, you know we're behind what should the height of those turbines be, how wide should the blades be, what should the angle of those blades be, when do you get to the point where you get too much stress on the turbine that you have problems with it. MRIGlobal is behind those kinds of things. We also spend a lot of time sort of looking at the next phase of programs that might be available to us, and some of the things are simple. I mean, here's a good example. I mean, that's a person standing on one of our turbines out there. You can get a feel for it. Each one of those blades is bigger than the span of a 747 plane, and those are the older generation. We're now moving to a new generation. The problem is they're too long to transport on a road. That's the limiting factor of what we can do with these wind turbines. They're too long to transport on a road, so we're cutting them into pieces in order to transport them and then putting them together. Moving into solar, which you can hear some of that Tom's going to talk about with Generator Studios today and what they've put out front, which is incredibly innovative. We have the world's largest solar test facility in looking at new technologies. Many of you may have heard of Solyndra and the collapse of Solyndra, which was a new solar technology and very innovative technology, but they were unsuccessful and failed and had a large loan from the federal government. This facility is designed to exactly protect against that, so that you don't have the Solyndras. You get the technologies, you put them out in the field. It's on an 80-acre plot of land, and we test them through winter, rain, sun, manufacturing, all those kinds of things going forward. So that's another innovation that we have in our company. We also do some other things like working with algae as a source of fuels. And then at NETL, which is the National Energy Technology Lab, we work with more traditional fossil fuels. But we look at how to use fossil fuel in a cleaner and more efficient way, and also innovative ways to get fossil fuels out of the ground. You've read about fracking for natural gas, but there's a lot of other ones related to sort of more traditional petroleum that we work on. Do a lot of work in the pharmaceutical sector. Believe it or not, and most people don't know this, they think of KU and others, we're the largest funding recipient in Kansas City from the National Cancer Institute, and actually have been for 3 decades. And our focus has been on both chemopreventative, so preventing cancer, and then also treatment of cancer. And we actually own both of the repositories, essentially the storage for those chemicals for entire international distribution for both prevention and treatment are actually here in Kansas City and run and managed by MRIGlobal. A lot of work in areas that you would traditionally read about. So, you got cigarettes and lead paint and pharmaceuticals and such. So we were really one of the first organizations to determine the negative impacts of lead and paint and the problems that caused with children and others. We do a lot of work and have done a lot of work historically on capabilities to help people quit smoking. So it's not dealing with the cigarettes and the dangers of cigarette smoking, but essentially technology, science, pharmaceuticals related to helping them quit smoking. And then we do a lot of work in drug testing and evaluation, and kind of one of the fun ones to talk about in this building is when you go down that rolling hill to the front of the building, essentially here to the south, the trees that line that area are ginkgo biloba trees. And a lot of you probably have heard of ginkgo. It helps your memory. It's an herbal product that if you go to any CVS, there's probably 15 brands of that product on the counter. A lot of what we do is evaluation of the safety of those kinds of materials because they're not managed and regulated like pharmaceuticals are when they're herbal formulations and herbal products. We've done thousands of evaluations on those kinds of things, and we always like to point out that there's ginkgo trees right here in our backyard. We're also very, very heavily into national security and defense, really on the sort of the security of our soldiers side of things and the security of our country. Probably one of our biggest programs is the designing and building of mobile laboratories. And they don't look particularly sexy on the outside, but when you get on the inside of them, these are multi-million-dollar laboratories, essentially, that can be located anywhere. So you could take them to the battlefield, staff them with chemists and biologists from MRIGlobal, and real-time soldiers are getting information that if they find a series of weapons in one of their hostile areas, are these biological weapons? Are they chemical weapons? Are they just explosives? What are they? They can get real-time information from our laboratories in the field. So we're all over the country with these mobile labs. I think we have about 80 of them out there protecting soldiers. And then here in the United States, they can be used if there were an attack or something like that. But also you could use them for things like Katrina and other sort of environmental disasters where you can get out in the field and you want mobile capabilities right there on site to look for hazards or contamination. We also have a lot of programs in Washington essentially protecting the nation's capital from the potential of an attack, a terrorist attack, when again it relates to chemistry or biology. So if there was a biological attack or a chemical attack, all these buildings in one way or another are managed or monitored by MRIGlobal in Washington to sort of give early warning and protection of that environment. Another thing we do is a lot of work with sort of advancing the military, and this is one of the robots. You're hearing a lot about robots today. This is one of the robots that we're building, which is a humanoid robot. There's a video out in the lobby out there that you can see him do jumping jacks and push-ups and all kinds of great things. It's just a still photo. And ultimately, this is a robotic soldier, not with the intent of going into battle, but with the intent of testing protective gear, testing all kinds of things that a soldier would get in the field, but you put it on this robotic soldier first and see if, it sweats, it breathes, it does all kinds of amazing things. It'll have artificial skin on it eventually. When a soldier's out there running around and he gets creases where there's seams in his clothes, does that provide an area for dangerous materials to possibly get in and contaminate that soldier? You do it with a robot first before you give those clothes and those protective equipment to a soldier. Another unique area we have, which you'll see a lot of our history out there, everything from, those of you that had drip coffee this morning, we were the ones involved with Folgers in the development of the first drip coffee maker. If you had instant coffee, we're the developed first instant coffee. On the right, we came up with the process for coating M&Ms so they didn't melt in your hand. True. And even today, we use those same capabilities. So this was back in the 50s. We coat seeds for farmers with all kinds of good things that give them competitive advantage, fertilizers or herbicides or pesticides that allow them to grow stronger, faster, more competitively by essentially these colors that are on here. There's a seed inside there. They're essentially coated with those materials. So same kind of technology. Very heavily into the protection of the food supply. So everybody reads about spinach. I think recently cantaloupe was out there. There's been a recent contamination of salmonella. I can't remember exactly where it was, but we do a lot of work in coming up with technologies for early detection so those those disease outbreaks essentially don't happen. We aren't involved in the response of it, but what we want to do is if a shipment of cantaloupe comes in, there's an easy way to test and monitor that before it gets distributed to you and me, and there's issues out in the field. So food safety and security is important. Transportation is significant for us. We've written most of the major regulations related to highway safety. What kind of angles are on-ramps and off-ramps? Where do you put the guardrails and the girders when you're in construction zones? I'm not saying everybody complies with what we tell them to do, but we write the regulations about those kinds of capabilities. We had a huge program with NASA on learning how to do barrel rolls in the Apollo program so that when their Apollo capsules came in, you actually were reducing the amount of heat in the capsule by having it barrel roll rather than just come directly in. So we used a lot of our engineering to teach them essentially at NASA how to roll their pod as it would return to the ground in the Apollo program. And lastly, and of course most excitingly, we work with dust. It's believe it or not, dust is an issue. I mean, if you think about, even just look at that picture at the bottom. Imagine that helicopter coming into a military area and you have soldiers there, just would obliterate their ability to see anything. Wildfires, essentially, if you think about the smoke that's there, that's really dust. So what we do is we do a lot of work with predictive modeling of where dust is going to go, but more importantly, how do you design things to mitigate dust? So how do you design helicopter blades so that it won't cause those kind of problems? How do you monitor in the field to understand how those things work and do things with trucks and their tires and things so that they don't distribute dust to the extent that you would normally see? Last comment is we're a huge contributor to this community. We're a not-for-profit organization, but that money that we do make, we plow back into the organization for research, and a lot we put out there in the community. You're going to hear from our friends at Paseo Academy here in a second, but we've spent a lot of time in a lot of different science programs in the region. One of the biggest ones is Science Pioneers. This is Charlie Kimball, who was our first long-term president of the organization. You'll see Kimball Fund on the back of the MRIGlobal t-shirts. That's what's supporting this event today. We've supported Science Pioneers for 50 years. Dr. Tom Sack, who's essentially our chief operating officer, is on their board of directors. We've been on their board of directors that entire 50-year period of time. And I'm really excited about today because this is sort of our new adopted science family, which is Paseo Academy. And we use that Kimball Fund to support Paseo, not just the robotics program, which you're going to hear a lot about and can see today, but also in mentoring, tutoring, all kinds of things related to sort of encouraging the next phase. And there's a lot of younger folks in the audience, getting them excited in science and engineering, technology, arts, math, how all those things connect, because you can grow up getting to do this kind of stuff that we do at MRIGlobal. And we're really proud of the folks at Paseo Academy. Their record has been unbelievable. Where their students are that have graduated now is unsurpassed. The scores on the ACTs, all those kinds of things. And we hope that we played a small part in that with our time and monetary contributions. So I thank you for listening to my whirlwind tour. Hopefully it teased you enough to go outside and talk with our folks and look at the things that we have here in the lobby. And then again, in the sculpture garden, we have a lot of hands-on stuff that particularly for the kids and others in energy that you have an opportunity to do some things. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here today.